Dzień dobry Państwu. Witamy bardzo serdecznie na spotkaniu
Good
informacyjnym,
morning,
które
ladies and
poświęcone jest
gentlemen.
konkursowi
Welcome to
Teamnet Fame.
the meeting on Teamnet Fan competition. My name is Radoslaw Kaniszewski. I'm the Deputy Director of the Program Division of the Foundation for Polish Science, and I'm joined by Ewa Janota, Deputy Director for Financial Coordination.
Spotkanie informacyjne poświęcone jest
During today's meeting, we are going to talk about the Teamnet Fan program, its substantive objectives, as well as financial requirements in order to prepare you as well as possible to apply. However, before we go into detail, I would like to begin by showing you this slide. This is information that we try to share with you at every opportunity in order for everyone involved to better understand the framework of our competitions. Teamnet, as well as other activities of our foundation, are co-financed by the European Union, which gives us a basket of almost 8 billion euros. This is the total funding, and the budget of our foundation is a part of this basket. Allocate 3%. It's a lot, I think it is. It is a worthwhile effort, I believe. Of course, this is joined to certain opportunities, but also risks, because we have to meet similar requirements to enterprises. The majority of the funds is allocated to small, medium-sized and large enterprises. The fact that we've been able to convince decision makers to also support research organizations from the same basket also implies that we have to meet certain requirements, and that's why we use certain terminologies. We have horizontal and vertical rules that we have to comply with. These are some rules imposed in a way from the outside, but we have to fulfill them, so please understand. So the programmatic offer of our foundation, apart from the prime program for the support of commercialization of science, involves 4 areas. I'm sure you remember them from the previous perspectives. So international research agendas, proof of concept, for the first time, the second time, the first team part. Why am I mentioning it? Because every activity, every area is dedicated to a different group of recipients. So it's important for you to consider whether the Teamnet is for you. I'm sure you've done your research already and you are convinced already. That's why you are joining this meeting. So creating islands of excellence and excellent research, excellent centers of excellence. This is our purpose. Proof of concept, a new activity. One edition has already started this year. The second one will start soon. The call for proposals will be announced in December. So this is an area where we try to support verifying research hypotheses. Actually, the part of research projects which is most risky. I'm sure first team is familiar to you. This is a chance for young postdoctoral researchers to start research teams. So this is for people who are between 2 and 9 years after obtaining the doctoral title. And this brings me to Teamnet. It's quite complex. After the first call, we know that it can be quite challenging and you need to prepare strategically. What are the main challenges of this program, of this competition? So first and foremost, excellent initial results or outcomes. So this is what you bring to the table when you start the program. The second challenge, it only lasts 3 years. And the third challenge, commercialization required at the end. And the requirement to work in a consortium which may be a difficulty for some, for others it makes things easier. But in general, it is quite challenging within the period of 3 years to carry out your research and commercialize. It is a challenge. However, it is achievable, as the winners or laureates of our program, the 4 of them, will certainly confirm. So this program is addressed to research organizations in Poland and leaders of research groups. We create consortia with the objectives of developing innovative solutions in the following strategic areas: the health, environment, and industry 4.0. We want to select and support consortia which do research in these areas and are characterized or marked by outstanding scientific potentials. We are hoping for better transfer of knowledge in the form of selling licenses, creating spin-offs. We hope that in the end an innovative product will land on the market, the product that you will develop as part of the Team Net program. Another objective is tied to strengthening the competences of researchers and scientists in Poland, for example, in the field of intellectual property development and protection and commercialization. A consortium involves between 2 and 3 research organizations which carry out scientific research. The consortium is tied by a consortium agreement defining the responsibilities of all partners, also defining the flow of information. Detailed requirements are available in our documentation, available online. We also give you a draft consortium agreement that you can use as a model for your agreement. Every consortium is headed by a consortium leader, and the consortium leader will be the party that signs the agreement with our foundation. In other words, the leader is the party to the agreement. So a consortium agreement is particularly important for the leader because this is the only document that regulates the obligations of other partners towards the leader. Main broker, another important position. This person is also the head of the commercialization team. And the broker operates within the institution of the consortium leader. We are only starting implementing the projects after the first call, so it will be defined in more detail. But in general, this is a person who thinks about commercialization from the very beginning, actually at the stage of preparing the application. Experience shows that it's best for effective knowledge transfer to think of commercialization from the very start, at the stage of application. So that's the most important thing to know about the broker. And now very briefly I would like to show you the available variants for consortia that we accept. There are 3 possible variants. I mentioned at least 2, but not more than 3 research team. After the first call, we've decided to limit the number. Initially we allowed for 5. This was not the perfect solution, which often meant the different projects just combined to research teams, and several projects will run in parallel. We want to avoid it in the future. We want to have one particular research goal, henceforth the delimitation. So we have research organizations, universities, technical universities with a research team in representing it. First option. The second one, 3 research organizations with a research team in one. So for example, an institute in the Polish Academy of Sciences, a university, of a technical university, and each research organization has one research team leader. And there is a third variant, which is also possible with two research organizations. And in one of them, let's say the university, you will have one research team, and then in the, let's say, one of the institutes of the Polish Academy of Sciences will have two research teams with two leaders. So these are the available, the possible variants. Settings. A team net can fund between 2 and 3 research teams. Every project should be planned for 3 years at most. If we have 2 teams, the maximum support amounts to 8.4 million zloty. If we have 3 teams, the maximum support is 12.6 million zloty for the entire consortium. There were a lot of questions about that before the first call, after the first call. Actually, this information was not clear enough. The funds do not have to be split equally between the teams. If we have 2 teams, and in one of the teams there is the leader, and you will decide that the leader will have more costs because of running the team, commercialization, or for any other reason, they need a bigger team. It is possible for this team have a budget of 6 million, and the 2.4 would go to the other team.
So you can share the money as you wish. This is just a cap. So the financing model remains the same. There is personal cost plus a flat rate, which is 40% of the direct eligible costs that will go for any other activity related to the project. There is remuneration, there are indirect costs, and this is covered by 40%, except for the salaries, but Eva will address that later on. Let's have a look now at all the roles and the rules of functioning. So option 2, we have 3 research organizations and 3 research teams. You might get up to 12.6 million zlotys, which can be split pro rata or in a different manner. So the consortium needs to be made up of the leader and the member, and they need to have a consortium agreement. There's a template on our website. The consortium needs to be created according to Article 39 of the implementation legislation. There was the first call of for papers, and it also learned us some lessons. And we learned some lessons from it. But according to Article 39, the bodies that carry out the project bring some resources into the project, and there is also a party that actually is the originator of the project, and they need to choose a partner from a range of partners which are different from the ones listed in the legislation on public procurement. So now I will explain what it means. So let's say there is a research organization that you would like to choose as a member of the research organization. So if it's not a public administration body, you need to have a call for proposals, and you need to give them up to 21 days to file applications. So this needs to be publicly available, and this is important, and this is also a indispensable model of the agreement if you want to get funding. But the public sector entities are excluded from this procedure. So if they are universities, research institutes, the Polish Academy of Science, the Łukasiewicz Network, and other organizations listed in the legislation on higher education, if you are covered by this legislation, you don't have to organize the call for consortium members. Now, the leader of the consortium. he or she is a party to agreement and is in charge of the accomplishment of the project, and it's also in charge of the commercialization of the project. The leader will hold rights to the results of the project, and this has to be made clear from the very beginning. I don't mean that the leader will hold the property rights, but they will have access. And now, also another important role, important for the commercialization. This is the broker, and he or she is the leader of the commercialization team. And I think that the strongest member of the team should be performing this role. So this is the main broker. Now, there is a change. If you remember the first call, back then the broker had to be hired at least half-time, but we got a lot of feedback from you that it was quite a challenge, actually. Because usually people who can perform this role don't have that much availability, half-time for 3 years. So we have performed negotiations with the managing authority, and now it has been changed. So at least quarter time. This is the condition that the broker needs to be hired at least quarter time. Of course, this is the minimum. And now we have the research team leaders, 2 or 3 people who are at least doctors, hold a PhD, and they need to be hired at least half-time for the whole project. There is no change here. The same goes for leader 2 and leader 3. All of them need to hold at least a PhD and be hired half-time. But usually there is one leader behind the whole idea of the project, and then they will choose the members of the consortium. So this is the leader, the mastermind of the project, but the mastermind, the one who actually has the substantive knowledge, doesn't have to be member of the leader team. And he doesn't have to be the leader. I mean, they can be the member of the consortium. Now, collaborating with companies, with business owners, we've received many questions about it, but the main question is whether business owners can be on board, whether they will get any funding. Well, the funding only goes to research organizations, but obviously you can have an active collaboration with business owners. This is according to Article 29 of the guidelines. This is quoted in the tender specs. So it addresses the issue of how you should draft the agreement with the business owners, what you should avoid, etc. So yes, of course, you can have a business owner on board. The leader needs to write an agreement, sign an agreement with them. And obviously, it's often necessary and welcomed, and it makes your project look more reliable. And sometimes, in some cases, the business owner is indispensable for certain goals. But strictly speaking, he or she is not part of the consortium. So business owners won't get any funding technically, and you can't pay them from the project's budget unless they are a subcontractor, but this is a different topic with different rules and a different approach. But if this is doing research together, you can't pay them.
Zespół do spraw komercjalizacji.
Now, the commercialization team. This is governed by the funding agreement.
Podkreślam jeszcze raz właśnie
You can find it in the documents. Let me stress one thing.
istotny podmiot. To jest bardzo ważny zespół, który
This is a very important team headed by the main broker plus a representative from every consortium member. So you can see that the leader will have the right to two representatives, the broker and the representative, plus representatives of the remaining members. They have to meet in the team at least once every 3 months, and leaders are invited to meetings as observers.
I to, co należy do zadań takiego zespołu? Ocena postępów realizacji projektu.
So the role of the team is to follow the progress of the project, to identify intellectual property, to assess the commercial potential of the results.
Zgód na publikowanie wyników
It also
konfliktem interesu.
approves the publication of the results of the project. And I won't read everything in the chart. You can read it yourself here.
Taka istnieje. Generalnie to jeszcze raz powtórzę, to
And
brokera,
also, the team is in charge of collaborating with the person in the leaders team that is in charge of the technology transfer, if this is the case.
transfer wiedzy, niestety często przez państwa, przez naukowców jest stawiane, nie mówię wszyscy, nie chcę też generalizować,
Unfortunately,
przewija.
if there is the aspect of technology transfer,
Po 4 latach
usually the
tu mieliśmy
team performing this role
ileś patentów i potem się okazuje, że osoby w centrach
are neglected until the last moment because at the end of the project they usually are given 3 months to meet the requirements of the project, and it's too late.
z rynkiem i
There is no time to talk to the market and find a potential partner.
ma
So the idea of this is to make it smoother and to make sure that there is a regular interaction between the researchers and the commercialization team.
kryteriów,
Now, the documents.
wzór wniosku o dofinansowanie, instrukcje pełnienia wniosku, to
I will discuss the application template and other aspects that are actually set down in the project criteria.
na poszczególnych etapach. Ocena
I
projektu,
will also discuss the evaluation of the project. There are 3 stages: the formal evaluation, the substantive evaluation, stage 1 and stage 2.
kryteriów, są kryteria obligatoryjne,
There are some criteria. Some of them are obligatory, some of them are yes or no criteria, and some of them are ranking criteria, so you get score.
do dokumentacji, więc jest na stronie od
So let me refer you to the documents that were published on our website on Friday,
pytań, które od państwa
because
trafiają. Możemy śmiało odesłać państwu
I think that you will find answers to 95% of the questions we get from you in these documents.
odpowiedź. Więc przechodzimy do etapu formalnego.
So now the formal stage, there are 3 obligatory criteria.
Na którą chcę zwrócić państwa uwagę.
Here, one important change.
Kryterium. Wniosek został złożony zgodnie z wymaganiami, sprawdzamy, czy jest kompletny, czyli
So here we check whether the application you file is actually complete and all right, whether it has all the attachments required, and see
tej do edycji wniosku przez
the
poważoną organizację
application needs to be signed properly by a authorized person, because usually in every call for papers we get a lot of applications, 5 to 10% that
przesłanych.
are unsigned
Zostało wdrożone w działaniu MAP,
or signed incorrectly.
będzie tak samo w działaniu TINNET i we wszystkich kolejnych.
There is the first time pending call for papers and other calls for papers we have in the pipelines, and usually
Zobaczymy, że coś jest nieprawidłowo.
this is often the case.
Załącznik jest jakiś,
So now if we realize there's something wrong,
jest niezamknięty.
you will have the opportunity to correct it. But if you send us an application which is not closed and not signed properly, it will be rejected. You won't have any option to correct it. So I just wanted to highlight it.
Że jeżeli ktoś zamyka wniosek, a jeszcze go nie zamknął do edycji, jeszcze w trakcie może coś poprawiać, więc mamy dwie różne wersje, musimy weryfikować
Because
ostateczną.
sometimes if the application is not closed, we get two different versions. One of them is still editable, so
Równe
it's
traktowanie.
problematic, and we want to give an equal treatment. There is a deadline. Please
Złożyć wnioski podpisane.
be prepared and submit only closed applications that can't be edited anymore and are signed properly.
Z artykułem 130
Now, the eligibility.
w pokładzie w konsorcjum.
So, consortia needs to be created under Article 39 of the implementation body. So, as I have already said, if a consortium involves a public financial sector body, there's no problem. The agreement needs to be signed electronically so that we know when it was made.
Liderki posiadają stopień naukowy doktora uzyskany nie później niż w dniu złożenia wniosku.
The project must consist of 2 or 3 teams by researchers with the required experience. It is represented by consortium leader who is in charge of commercializing the project. You submit the consortium agreement for evaluation as well. There is a head researcher, which is the author of the substantive part and leader of one of the teams. It does not have to be a scientist from the consortium leaders team, not necessarily. Also, you have to name the broker, the person who will be employed for commercialization of the project. So do you need a broker at this stage? No, but for the application, you have to give us a name because the experience of this person will be evaluated. So if you receive funding, it will be necessary. So you don't need to have that person at this stage, but later you will. And this person has to be employed as a quota of full-time position. If you apply for 36 months, we will check if your broker is employed for the entire duration of the project, because there were cases where the project had a duration of 36 months, but the broker was only employed for 33, and this application had to be rejected. Leaders will be employed for at least half full-time equivalents for the entire duration of the project. Another technical issue that I would like to talk to you about is when we expect the results of this call. So we will accept applications by the end of September. During the first call, it was possible to finish the procedure without the required term of 150 days, and we hope to do it again, so to close this by the end of February. So it seems reasonable that the beginning of project implementation should be somewhere at the beginning of April. So this is what we encourage you to do, but this is your choice. You can start earlier or later. But when we talk about these initial results that have innovative potential that can be verified today, if you decide to start in 1 year's time, it may be problematic, and the committee may have some doubts if it will remain innovative in 1 year's time. So bear that in mind.
Tak się spodziewamy i tak.
So the results of this call are expected in late February, so you can start planning your work in spring next year. Again, bear that in mind. You will need some time to sign the funding agreement with us, and also bear in mind, because this is a problem that is repeated in many projects, you plan to start on April 1st, 2026. And you have a postdoc or a doctoral candidate employed for 36 months, and you start your project, and in week 1 you apply for a change because you have to find that doctoral candidate. They are not available yet. They will be available in September, and time goes by, and so does money. So bear that in mind. When you plan the start of your implementation, make sure you have a research team at the ready. So as regards this criteria, it's obligatory, and the evaluation is positive if this criterion is met regarding all the requirements. At this stage, you can actually change and improve if something's missing. Also the same applies to eligibility of expenditure. We check whether the eligibility period doesn't lay beyond December 31st, 2029, which is the final date of eligibility for the programs financed by the European Funds for a Modern Economy. What we also check is whether the expenditure you apply for includes costs other than remuneration of personnel, research and development tasks and brokers. The planned lump sum for remaining project costs amounts to 40% of direct eligible costs of staff remuneration, and also the amount is in line with the project selection regulations. So if you pass, if the assessment is positive, we move to the second stage, the substantive assessment, which involves 2 stages. And if you pass, then the broker, the leaders are invited to our offices. Your initial outcomes and your addressees, so where you see your market, this is assessed at this stage. Then we look at the novelty and originality of your outcomes, the outcomes that you bring to the table, that you describe in the application. Novelty and originality should be proved in comparison with the current state of knowledge. So you have to refer to literature, to patents. You have to inform us which databases you are quoting. It is your task to convince the committee that your idea is innovative enough and original enough compared to the current state of knowledge. It's also important to say that your outcomes must have been verified to a certain extent. We don't want to see something that is at a very early stage. We want to have something that shows promise of commercialization. So your outcomes must be innovative, original, and adequate. And here you have no chance to correct, so your application stays. Now, market potential, and this is a criterion I want to spend some more time on because it can be problematic. You have to, we will look at the following aspect: descriptions of the needs of direct recipients as a result of your work. And what do we understand under the term direct recipients? I gave this example last year, but I will repeat it. So, for example, a certain molecule for a medicine is being worked on, and we expect that there will be a preclinical and clinical trial. Of course, later on, it's not realistic at this stage, but along the path. The direct recipient is not a patient, is not a physician who's going to prescribe the medicine, because there are millions of potential patients. probably your recipient will be a small biotech company that has certain requirements. They are testing some therapeutic windows, or maybe with this company it will be possible. This company wants to check if you can work and process this molecule in room temperature. So your recipient is someone very specific on the market, someone who may make your commercialization possible. For me, it's possible that active concentration of this molecule is not bigger than 1 nanometer per milliliter. I'm just making up, but something specific. So you have to be in conversation with the market. You have to know what the challenges are, what is needed. You have to know from the market what can be competitive. And this must then be reflected in your milestones in the research agenda. So this is how we understand direct recipients. In case of medical technology, probably a small biotech company which can expect to start developing it further and working with big pharma in the future, or maybe grow independently. What's also important to know, spin-offs are vehicles. They are mechanisms. They are not direct recipients. So bear that in mind. If your idea is that you will conclude with commercialization because you will establish a spin-off, you have to go a step further. A spin-off is just a vehicle. And B, description of your competitive advantages when you compare your project to solutions available on the market. Experience shows that competition always exists. It's impossible to have a situation where there is no competition. Even if you are solving a problem directly, or there are probably other ways of solving it on the market. Maybe these alternatives don't have the required quality. Maybe the competitors do it on a different level, but there are always competitors, and you have to mention them. If you see that no direct solution for your problem is available on the market, then your competitors are other research teams. So have a look around and mention potential competitors, companies or research teams. You have to meet this requirement to fulfill this criterion, and at this stage you can receive 10 points. You need at least 8 to pass. And if you do, then we move on to the second stage of substantive assessment with a number of criteria defined for your research area. We will look whether or not the topic of your application matches the strategic areas of Team NetFeng, that your application does not refer to excluded areas. Basic research is excluded. That this is a requirement within the FENG program, and it is always addressed because in many applications basic research is included, which is a clear proof that you don't have the initial outcomes that you have to bring to the table. So I emphasize again, we don't fund basic research, and of course your scope has to match the scope of national smart specialization, and the solutions you propose should address the current social and economic challenges. In this case, if the committee has any doubts, they can come back to you and ask you to supplement something, to explain something, to correct something. Now, justification of expenditure. This is going to be Eva's topic, but let me say that the planned expenditure must be in line with the eligibility criteria, the amount of planned costs, and for R&D activities, and the brokers must be rational and must be justified. And this is often an issue, a misunderstanding what it means to be justified or rational.
regulaminów nie jest jeszcze warunkiem wystarczającym.
So it's not enough to meet the requirements of internal regulations. You have to be able to justify, to substantiate that these amounts are the amounts that are required, that need to be paid on the market for such needs. So meeting the internal regulations is not sufficient for this criterion to be met and for all amounts to be approved by the committee. And the rates planned by individual research teams and the lump sums must be justified and adequate
Zadań, które są przewidziane w agendzie.
for the scope of tasks foreseen in the agenda. In this case, it is possible to correct your application, but not in order to increase the amount you apply for. If you have a budget of 12.6, we may require you to correct the amount, but you cannot apply for a higher amount. Now, outcome and output indicators, you have to have such indicators. We'll look at them, you have to point them out, but actually if you don't have them, we will notice it at the formal assessment stage, and the indicators must be adequate for the applied support, and the base value and target value of the indicators must be calculated, and the method of calculation must be indicated.
Mamy odgórnie wskazane dlatego
So
liczbę organizacji badawczych, która jest w konsorcjum, liczba
If there is a number of organizations that are part of the consortiums made up front, there are other formalities decided up front. So if you have the output indicators like the number of publications, the patent applications, they need to be adequate. Don't think that more is better, that if you declare 5 patent applications, you are more likely to get money. This is not a race. This needs to be reliable and thought through, because sometimes the Commission might ask you to bring the number of patent applications down, because everything needs to be plausible, realistic. This is not where you get scores.
czego wymaga projekt.
Just check whether it's necessary. Sometimes there are projects that don't need patent applications afterwards. It's also possible, but you need to explain why. So we want realistic, plausible indicators. So now the rights of the consortium to carry out the project and commercialize the results. So does the consortium hold the intellectual property? Again, often at the end of the project, actually it turns out that in the research group there was a student, and the student got their degree and just disappeared. And then an investor comes, they are interested in the commercialization of the project. They go through all the documents, and actually there are names of people that the university can't contact. So the investor is not interested anymore because of the risks involved. Hence the criteria, and hence this requirement. We need to check and have control over the intellectual property from the very beginning, and show it to us, prove it, that you have access to all the intellectual property that is necessary, that it won't block you. So it needs to be made clear from the very beginning. We also use this approach in our other calls for applications, and actually we got a very good feedback from you.
Teraz zostało poprawione.
Now, conflict of interest. We want to check the leaders of the research teams and the main broker, whether they have any personal or capital links.
Jak ma, to taka osoba
If you have, it doesn't mean that
w większości wypadków
we won't like it. Simply, in most cases, conflicts of interest can be managed, but if you don't disclose it, it's wrong. So just show us how you can manage the conflict of interest if it's there, through reporting, etc.
Więc to, że jest konflikt, to jeszcze nie
So if there is a conflict, well, it's not a tragedy, simply just manage it.
pojawiają się zasady horyzontalne. Są zasady
Now, there are horizontal rules like non-discrimination, equality, gender equality, sustainability. When we launched our calls for applications in 2023, at the very beginning was a new thing to us as well, and it was problematic. But now we are all learning. You are better and better at it with every call. So now I can see that it's going good. The ministry, the managing authority,
dla nich jesteśmy instytucją pośredniczą.
controls the money, so we are the intermediate body for them.
Oni również wypuścili na rynek, opracowali
So the ministry has also published some guidelines about the environment. It's available on the nowoczesnagospodarka.gov.pl website, and there is also a guide on equality rules on the same website. So have a look. It might be helpful
toku realizacji
for your application and project.
kryterium. Projekt spełnia zasady horyzontalne równości.
So the next criterion is that the project needs to meet the horizontal rules of non-discrimination and
Co ocenia
equality of opportunities. Here you can see what we are going to evaluate.
że projekt spełnia te zasady,
So we will check whether the project meets the rules of non-discrimination and gender equality, race equality, etc.
są dostępne dla osób z niepełnosprawnościami.
All the products need to be available for people with disabilities.
Można poprawić, ale w nawiązaniu do tego
You can also amend this criterion, but as I've already said, if you're doing this for the first time,
to te poradniki na pewno będą
please consult the guides. They will be helpful. And also the manual,
mówi o tym, co w jakim polu
the guide on how to fill in your application also address this issue in detail.
kwestią zgodności z kartą praw podstawowych.
The same goes for the compliance with the Fundamental Rights Charter. We explain what we expect and how to address it. The same goes for the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. But usually you've handled it very good, although it was also a learning curve.
Zrównoważonego rozwoju. Tu chcę
Now, the sustainability rule,
oczywiście poza tym, że muszą być mierzalne,
we have some indicators. They need to be measurable. They need to be project related. They need to have a benchmark value. We need to have documents for that.
poczet projektu, a
So don't think that you might put anything in the project and then you will see how it works. No, it doesn't work this way, because you get the money, you start the project, and with every payment application, you need to prove that you've met the rules. So you have to have documents to substantiate it. So if you declare that you are going to reduce the use of a product, you will need to write it down in some lab logs, etc. So please have a look at the suggested indicators and choose the ones that you are really capable of following up and delivering. Don't think that you can put anything you want on paper, because afterwards you might have problems when substantiating your declarations.
dokonuje pewnych
So there has been a change here. The ministry have made some corrections. So at the beginning, there was the 6R rule: reduce, reuse, recover, recycle, and so on, rethink.
Wiem. I było tak, że muszą być dwie zasady.
So at the beginning, you were requested to put 2 rules. Now it's less strict now. So you can only choose 1 rule and choose 2 indicators within this single rule. You can also have another rules outside of the 6R aspect, which are also environment related and will be improved by 10% along the project. So please read it. The main idea of these changes is to streamline and make it easier for you to prepare at least 2 indicators. Now the substantive assessment, so the plan and the scope of the project. So the participation of every team needs to be necessary. Don't add consortium members that are not really needed.
Zobaczcie, jakich zasobów z perspektywy projektu brakuje i z takim...
So if you are creating a consortium, just focus on what resources you really need and choose members accordingly. 3 years might be a challenge. You might have a great project with a great consortium, but it will be rejected anyway because a 3-year time span is a hard criterion. So you need to have a realistic timeline for that, with milestones, with stages, and with some risks defined for the milestones and risk mitigation measures.
To, czym mają się poszczególne etapy zakończyć.
So it would be perfect if the milestones were defined as a result of talking to the market. So this would prove that you have a comprehensive approach. It would be much more convincing than a project which is completely not related to market needs.
To jest ocena za całe kryterium.
So then you get a mean score from all these criteria, but if you fail to meet one criterion, you will get rejected. Now, the skills and the experience of the research team. Previously, we focused on the experience of the whole university, the whole entity. Now, we want to focus on the skills and expertise, which is really related to the project. So we focus on the project team and the main researcher. So we often get applications where someone describes their papers published with the total impact factor of 300. Don't do that. Just choose specific papers. One achievement is one paper, and show us how this will be helpful for this project and why this is your main achievement. This doesn't have to be a paper. It can be a patent application, a collaboration case. We just want to have specific information and clear information up to 5 points. So list your achievements. We need to check it. And if it's not clear whether you actually show 5 or 6 achievements, you will get the documents back, and this is not necessary. So please make it clear. A list of 5 achievements of the main researcher. The same goes for the leaders. Here we ask for up to 3 achievements and how they will be useful for the project. And the expertise of the main broker also needs to be adequate and needs to cover the last 5 years. So this is also a ranking criterion. 0 to 5 points. So if it's a biotech project and you have expertise in molecules and working with big pharma, it's going to be very valuable and you will get a high score. But if you have a broker who doesn't have a lot of expertise in this field, it doesn't mean that they won't do for the project. Because some expertise is universal. Of course, a broker that actually works specifically in the field will get more score. But if this broker is valuable for you, they will get a lower score, but it doesn't mean that it disqualifies him. Because I know cases where some teams just gave up because they didn't have the right broker, but actually they should have. Here you can't amend your application on the way, so once you submit your application, you will not be able to correct it. So please pay a lot of attention to this. Now the last criterion, which is your plan, how you are going to use the results, the output. So here we are going to change how you want to commercialize the results and how you are going to put in the market and get validations, certificates, licenses, also with a timeline. There is a very common mistake in applications that where people write, the project is going to be commercialized directly, indirectly, depending on the results. After 3 years, we will check whether it's going to be a license with setting up a company.
This is insufficient. This is not precise enough. This is not concrete. If you read the strategy and you feel that you can copy-paste it to 4 different projects, this is not a well-written strategy. It has to be connected to your specific subjects. Here we allow for corrections, and you need to get a score of at least 3 in order for this criterion to be met. So in the end, we summarize all the points if all obligatory criteria are met, and you've received at least 20 points. For the possible 24, we recommend your project. The allocation is higher than in the first call, with 120 billion zloty. The call has already been announced. July 4th. The announcement was made on July 4th. We will try collecting your applications on September 3rd. I know it's not a perfect date for you, but this is what it is, so you can start working on it. We will close the call on September 24th, and this is also new. We won't be waiting until midnight for your applications. This is what we did before. In this case, we close the call at 4 p.m. because we have heard from you that on the one hand it is good to have the chance to submit your applications by midnight, but then we see that you try to finish things at the very last minute, and if you need to communicate with us at the final stage, it might be very difficult to reach any one of us before midnight. So that's why we close the call and stop collecting your applications at 4 p.m. If you have questions about the TeamNet, our call, you can ask questions via email. The address is teamnet@fnp.org.pl. Myself, but also Paulina Wiek and Dr. Paulina Roszczenko-Jasińska will be available for your questions. So drop us an email. If you need to, you can also call us. If anything is not clear, when you read the documentation and we decide that it is not clear to everyone, then we will actually publish our answers to your questions in the FAQ part of our website so that every applicant has the same information. I forgot to mention one thing. At the end of this presentation, we will send you a survey questionnaire. Please answer the questions and send it back to us. These are going to be questions about our presentations, obviously. And on this note, I would like to finish and give the floor to my colleague.
Nie jestem pewna, czy Państwo widzą.
I'm not sure if you can see my presentation.
Ja Państwu postaram się krótko.
Do hope you can. I will try to be very brief. I have a lot of information, but I will try not to keep it too long. The eligibility of expenditure. The rules are very simple. They are much simpler to what you will see in first team on international research agendas, where you have to settle your projects based on actual expenditure. Our structure is simpler. We look at the salaries of people who are directly involved in implementing the project. A lump sum of 40%, which should cover all other costs connected to the projects, of course connected to the project goal, is also very simple. Also, indirect costs should be covered by the 30%. Indirect costs are costs that you additionally incur for administration, for utilities, for rental, also anything that you would normally be covered by the term indirect costs, in this case is covered by the 40%, which should also cover other costs. And it is your task to divide the 40% in a way that will make it possible to implement the project, to make all necessary purchases, and also cover the so-called indirect costs. I'm sorry, I'm trying to switch the slide. I apologize for this delay. Somehow it's difficult, actually impossible for me. Can someone help me, please? Yeah.
Dobrze. Przede wszystkim coś, na co Państwo powinniście zwrócić szczególną uwagę.
So please bear in mind, when you prepare the budget for your project, all expenditure that you are planning must be in line with the cost eligibility guidelines, with what you planned in your budget at the application stage. This is the basis for our assessment of eligibility of your costs later in the project. This is essential in order for us to be able to see if these costs have been foreseen in the application. All regulations that you are obliged to comply with also apply in this case, including the public procurement law. We will not be verifying whether you or not you comply with all the legal provisions in this respect, with one exception that I will explain, but obviously you are obliged to meet all these criteria, the criteria of the relevant legislation. As regards financial support and who receives it, Radosław has already talked about it, but I would like to reiterate that financial support for the project and the budget for your project can only be received by members of the consortium.
często pytacie,
we emphasize it often because you often ask how you can fund some operations of enterprises. You can't do it. This is state aid, public support really without own contribution. So any direct transfers to enterprises are out of the question unless you enter into a collaboration agreement, but this is a completely different format, and then you pay for different things within the project. Other than that, there is no possibility to transfer money directly to companies, to enterprises. Also,
ani na zasadzie
consortium partners cannot commission other partners, other members with different tasks. You cannot subcontract any work to other consortium members or employ their employees in your undertakings. We haven't seen such attempts recently, but there were some ideas to this end early in the process where applications were being prepared. We received some questions. So this is not allowed. You plan your work based on your personnel. It's not possible to subcontract anything to other consortium members.
Jeśli chodzi o wydatki, które
Now,
kwalifikują
in terms of eligible costs or expenditure, this is a quote from our catalog, but also our guidelines and the agreement. These costs must be necessary in order to implement the project. This must be in line with the defined categories of costs indicated in the application. These costs must actually have been incurred and it must be documented. Of course, this applies to salaries.
w projekcie jako rzeczywiście poniesione wydatki
These are costs that you actually
w ramach
must incur, and you must indicate them in the application. This does not apply to the lump sum of 40%, which does not mean that you don't have to collect documents on this subject. You still have to do it, obviously, but we will not be checking it, as we will simply assume that you have the required internal documentation which is needed in such cases. When you plan the structure of your budget, look at your project start, because all costs that you plan before the project start will not be eligible.
stanowić również,
Bear that in mind
kiedy Państwo planujecie ten projekt rozpocząć.
and plan the start of your project accordingly, because it is only after this date, of course, provided that you have passed all the stages of the process, but only costs incurred after that date may be deemed eligible. Another bit of information that I would like to underline, as it may be new to you, especially compared to what you know from the previous perspective, all costs of the value-added tax are eligible in the project. However, there is an asterisk here.
Weryfikacji tego, czy Państwo macie prawo kwalifikować VAT w projekcie.
Whether or not your VAT cost is eligible will not be checked by us. However, in our country, we do have services and authorities who have the right to verify your VAT costs. So this is something that may happen to you during the project and also after its completion, especially the tax authorities, financial authorities are authorized to check whether or not your VAT costs were eligible. In terms of the provisions included in the guidelines, VAT is an eligible cost.
Idziemy powoli do kategorii wydatków w działaniu.
Now I would like to move on to different categories of expenditures. of expenditure in TeamNet, it is very simple. We are talking about costs of remuneration, a cost of salaries here. Of course, only salaries of those people who are directly involved in the project, so project staff. This also the technology innovation broker. In the majority of projects that we deal with, staff are people who are employed, so they must have a formal contract of employment. Of course, it is possible that you work with someone based on a civil law contract of mandate, for example. It's also a possibility. You have to sign a relevant agreement with this person. And if you plan to do it, please mention it in your application. When you plan your budget, when you plan the implementation of your project, if you
I wtedy jakby kompetencje tych osób będą oceniane przez ekspertów w trakcie oceny projektu. Czy też wiecie, że na przykład będzie...
If you know the name of this person and the competences, mention them in your project, and then these competences will be assessed by the committee. If you don't know, however, who this person is going to be specifically, but you know that you will need so and so many technicians, then obviously you cannot mention the names in the applications. However, during the duration of the project, when you sign a contract of mandate with such a person, you cannot sign a contract with just any technician of your choice. You have to organize a competitive procedure, collect offers, everything in line with the regulations. So you have to work with estimates, initially estimates of your costs, and then competitive procedures must apply for the selection of such a person. Also, your internal regulations, in part that refers to certain thresholds defined by the public procurement law, tend to be much more strict than eligibility guidelines that we work with. Bear that in mind. So we would also like to encourage you to make sure that you comply with your internal regulations for the selection of contractors. Because this applies if you don't indicate your contractors at an early stage, if you are unable to name at the stage of application.
So something we focus on when you're planning the project, please focus on who you will be hiring and what task they will have. I mean substantive tasks. I'm saying this because any tasks that involve the costs of remuneration of the head researcher and leader, only one who's in charge of the settlement and monitoring, so any administrative tasks. So in this case, the costs will be eligible, but the whole remuneration of this person will be settled according to the 40% flat rate. So we won't be establishing what percent of the remuneration concerns substantive tasks and what percent covers administrative or management activities. Simply in this case, the whole remuneration will be covered by the flat rate. So pay a lot of attention to this. Because people who are directly involved in the project need to have strictly substantive tasks related with the performance of the project and no administrative tasks.
Tu właśnie macie Państwo slajd, o który ja już wcześniej omówiłam, czyli
So here, this is something I have already addressed, naming people, giving names of people.
zlecenie
So if you have a contract for mandate,
zawierane z własnymi pracownikami.
you can also make such a contract with your own employees. So this has changed
W perspektywie finansowej,
compared to the previous financial perspective.
wiedzieć na etapie planowania projektu, czy takie osoby już znacie.
But you need to know that at the stage of planning, whether you know the people, their names, who they will be,
Procedury wyboru
because this will determine your selection procedures that you will be required to apply or not. Because if you provide a name,
wiecie Państwo, co do zasady
as a rule, you don't have to perform the competitive procedure of staff selection.
projektu.
Now, hiring people for the project.
Z Państwem wrócić również do informacji, które Radek pokazywał.
And this takes me back to one of the charts showed to you by Radek.
Muszą być zaangażowane do projektu na podstawie umów.
So, where it's required to make an employment contract with people.
W ramach umów zlecenie, w ramach.
So, have a look at the people in the chart.
Za chwilę wyjaśnię, kiedy ten dodatek może być.
So sometimes you just need what we call an additional payment. These are the rules that follow directly from the project guidelines. If you fail to meet these rules, you simply don't meet the project selection criteria. So both the main researcher, and also the leaders of the research teams need to be hired at least half time throughout the whole time span of the project. And there has been a change concerning the main broker, because we don't require half time involvement. It's now quarter time. Of course, it might be more, but the minimum is quarter time.
Tu odstępstw od tych zasad nie ma.
And these are strict rules. I know it's often problematic for you because the main researchers and the leaders, the main brokers are often involved in other projects.
Decydując się na realizację projektu TeamNet, te
But if you are applying for a TeamNet project, you must meet these requirements.
zaangażowanie tych osób na przykład,
What we accept is
że będziecie Państwo rozliczać w projekcie tylko do
hiring these people according to what we call the additional payment only. But at the same time,
mają być oddelegowane do projektu w tym wymiarze etatu.
they need to be posted for the project half-time or quarter-time accordingly as shown in the chart.
Wprowadzenie zasadnicze
And in the contract you make with this person, you have to set down
finansowane jest ze
that the remuneration is paid with the own funds of the university or the center,
temu wymiaru
and the additional
realizacją projektu
payment
finansowane jest ze środków projektu.
is paid with the project's
Natomiast
funds. This is very rarely the case, but we get asked about that, so I just wanted to explain. It's possible to do it this way, but anyway, you have to hire the people for the time required, but the only difference is that part of it is paid by the beneficiary with their own funds.
Jeśli chodzi o zaangażowanie osób, o których mówiłam wcześniej, ale również całego personelu,
So, hiring people, the functions I mentioned before, but also all the staff,
państwa
before they get involved in the project, everyone should file a statement saying that their total involvement in different projects and
poza państwa
other engagements, also civil law contracts,
niesie
is not more than 270 hours a month. 276 hours a month. And this is a statement that needs to be submitted by everyone personally. The main researcher can't sign the statements on behalf of the team, so everyone needs to do it on their own.
I to pracownik, osoba zaangażowana do projektu powinna Państwa poinformować, jeśli takie
And they also should let you know if, let's say,
może być przekroczony w danym miesiącu.
in a specific month, the limit, 276 hours, have been or might be exceeded. We will rely on your statements. You don't report the working time here, so we will rely on your statements.
Zachodzi podejrzenie, że to 276 godzin.
But if there's a risk that this time might be exceeded,
Podmiot angażujący te osoby do projektu powinien się takie informacje otrzymać.
as you are the entity that is hiring the people, they should let you know.
Na umowy zlecenie.
This also concerns people who will be working with you under the contract for mandate, because the 276 hours covers any forms of collaboration employment contract.
Warunek, o którym mówiłam, powinien być spełniony w całym okresie realizacji.
And this condition applies for the whole period of the project.
Angażowanie pracowników na część etatu do projektu
Now, speaking about people hired half-time or part-time,
albo bezpośrednio w umowie o pracę,
so
w delegowaniu lub też w
there are specific tasks that need to be defined in the employment contract.
realizacji merytorycznej projektu powinny być wyraźnie wyodrębnione.
So the substantive tasks need to be specifically defined in the contract.
Stanowiska pracy.
In the section about the employee's duties, for instance, and we will ask you for these documents. Also, it should substantiate the pay foreseen for this person
do projektu.
and the proportion in which he or she will be hired for the project.
I tego, jak te wynagrodzenia w projekcie będą wyglądały.
So this is about estimating the payments. You will certainly get questions about the salary estimates
Ani ze strony KOP-u nie będzie.
unless your application is so good and perfect. In this case, you won't get any questions, but you might be also asked about it during the project by people who will be verifying it.
Uwagę.
So please pay attention to this.
Do oszacowania wynagrodzeń w Państwa projektach jest
If you're giving a salary estimate, you have to rely on your internal remuneration rules. Sometimes in your internal rules, there are articles about bonuses, etc. This is your benchmark, this is your foundation. We also publish our analyses, but this is only for you as an example, to have a look, to show you what the market rules looks like.
mówimy, ale tak naprawdę coś jakby punktem wyjścia do szacowania wynagrodzeń.
But if you are
Zakres zadań,
suggesting a salary, you need to rely on the duties, the scope of duties of your employees, of the project staff, on the project goals, and first of all, the internal rules of remuneration in your organization.
każde z wynagrodzeń, jeśli przewidują to Państwa regulaminy, może się składać z różnych elementów.
If your internal rules provide for it, but any salary can be made up of many different elements. This can be the basic pay, but also it might involve some additional
Nagrody premii,
components like bonuses, perks, etc.
że tak, takie dodatkowe wynagrodzenia państwo możecie
And yes, you can also include these additional components as long as it had been included in your internal rules at least 6 months before the project application submission. And this should cover everyone, and not only the project employees, project personnel. The bonuses, benefits, perks should be linked to performing additional tasks in the project.
przyznajecie i tam jest jedno zdanie, że to jest dodatek związany z realizacją projektu.
You can't simply say that this is a bonus related to the project. We need more information. We need specific information on additional tasks related to project and what they are.
Możecie państwo rozliczać również tak zwane dodatkowe wynagrodzenie.
You can also settle what we call the additional annual salary in proportion to the employee's salary under the project.
Jeśli chodzi o wynagrodzenia, to również tak zwane dodatki stażowe możecie państwo.
You can also include seniority bonuses in your calculations.
13 wynagrodzenie.
And what we call the 13th monthly salary. If you are going to use it, please include it in your calculations, because we have been dealing with projects where people have forgotten about adding the 13th salary for, let's say, the key personnel.
Naprawdę przy dobrym oszacowaniu budżetu nie ma skąd przesunąć.
And sometimes actually there's no money in the budget for that, and you
Będziecie
will have to pay it anyway. You must in some cases.
musimy o uwzględnienie
So please don't forget to take it into account when you are preparing your budget.
Wynagrodzenia stanowią bazę do obliczenia
Salaries
40%
are
ryczałtowej. I tak jak
the basic element if you want to calculate the 40% flat rate. As I've already said, this concerns also any other eligible costs directly related to the project, but also indirect costs.
pośrednich macie państwo zawarte
The catalog of indirect costs is included in the eligibility cost guidelines, so I'm not going to speak about it because the catalog is very neatly described in the guidelines.
rozliczane stawką ryczałtową są przez nas traktowane
So costs covered by the flat rate should be actually incurred costs, so we don't require you to collect any invoices or other documents confirming that you have incurred them. However, you are bound by your internal regulations, so it is still your obligation to collect such documents or invoices. In most cases, it happens. Now, as for the settling the flat rate,
na poziomie 40%.
it will be exactly 40% every time
Będziecie przekazywać
whenever you submit an application for payment,
o refundację wydatków.
whether it's the point when you settle your costs or apply for reimbursement. Also, all corrections that we introduce will affect this amount. Such corrections may, for example, be required if a part of remuneration is deemed not eligible by us, or you fail to provide documentation that would allow us to deem certain costs as eligible. Then the payment will be reduced proportionally.
Tej stawki ryczałtowej. Niezależnie
So the amount of remuneration will be reduced in proportion, and so will the flat rate,
w okresie rozliczeniowym ponieśliście.
regardless of the costs that you have incurred in a certain period.
Katalog kosztów
Now, as for the catalog of costs that you can plan,
musiliśmy Natomiast to nie jest katalog.
under the flat rate. We have drafted such a catalogue, but it is not exhaustive. We wanted to indicate certain groups of costs or types of costs that you might want to plan in your projects. However, if there are other costs that we have not foreseen in this catalogue, but which are still either directly or indirectly connected with your project, you can include them. At the budget evaluation stage, our experts will look at what costs you have planned under the flat rate, and
Po to, żeby sprawdzić i potwierdzić, czy na
in order to verify whether or not you will be capable of implementing the project as planned. They will verify whether you have the necessary equipment, the necessary materials, or whether you have planned to purchase the necessary materials in order to be able to implement the project. We usually see in your application descriptions that literally includes cost types and allocated budgets. Say we have certain materials that need to be purchased for your project. You provide us with an estimate of cost that will be necessary to purchase these materials. The same applies to equipment or other costs. And in many cases, this is a good foundation for later negotiations with financial services on the topic of indirect costs, because financial directors often want to see what specifically you are planning in your project and how much of the 40% budget can be allocated to indirect costs. These are cost types that we have foreseen in the catalogue. I'm not going to go through all of them. I just want to emphasize that if you are planning to enter into civil law contracts under the category of salary, do not plan to sign any contracts for a specific work, because just plan a contract of mandate instead. Also, all costs connected to patent applications, if you are planning some conferences, conference fee, if you plan to send your employees to certain events or trips, plan all these costs under the 40% limit. All such costs will be covered, of course, in proportion to the proportional participation of the team net projects in your publication, because very often do we see publications in which several projects are involved, and then related costs can be covered by TeamNet in proportion to its share in the publication. It would be nice, ladies and gentlemen, if this category would cover some costs of external audits. It is not an obligation, but bearing in mind that in your projects you will be working in consortia with relatively high budgets, we strongly encourage you to also include external audit. External audit might be able to indicate some areas of your projects during their duration that are not working well. Do not see it as an attempt to control you externally. It's just an external perspective with the aim of helping you to improve on certain areas of your project that might not be working perfectly. Of course, when we implement the project, there will be controls, there may be controls, but this is not what I'm talking about. External audit should be involved at an earlier stage already to help you run your project better. So don't wait for an external inspection or control to point out to any imperfections. Involve external auditors earlier. Now, also, as an intermediary body, we do not interfere with how you decide to split your your indirect costs, how you decide to distribute your 40% flat rate. This is your task. You have to do it well in order to be able to fund all the purchases that are required for your project, as well as cover all indirect costs such as administration. So it is your responsibility to do it in order to be able to run your project efficiently and then settle all the costs. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, but we have the slide, so I have to say that you cannot use the 40% flat rate to cover costs that are not eligible. So only eligible costs can be covered by the 40%, or ineligible costs must be covered by your own funds. As regards such costs, they are very well described in eligibility guidelines. This is the subsection that speaks directly about ineligible, non-eligible costs. Please read it carefully. And costs may be declared eligible at any stage of project implementation, and we've made this experience that the panel of experts indicates certain costs that are deemed non-eligible by the panel at different stages, and then the applicant's budgets must be corrected. Experts might also have questions to you about your salary estimates. And so don't be surprised when you received such questions from the experts. They will give you a chance to show the experts how you've prepared your salary estimates, where the rates come from, which tasks will be performed by individual persons, especially if your salaries are significantly different than the salaries that would be suggested by your internal regulations or from the experiences of the experts. And in TeamNet projects, experts do look very carefully at salaries because salaries are actually the basis for all the remaining costs. And if any irregularities should be noticed with regard to salaries, you will also lose a part of your flat rate. And well, this is where I would like to put a stop to my presentation. I would like to hand over to Radek and ask him for a summary. Let me just say that if you have any questions, and usually there are questions about salaries, if you have such questions, please write an email. Radek will show you the slide with my email address as well. Let's stay in touch. You have time until the 4th of September. And this time, please think very carefully about how you want to build your budget, who should be involved, whether or not you want to settle costs of contract of mandates under the category called salaries, and if these contracts will be signed with your employees or not. So you have some time, start working on your budget so that you can start preparing your application officially in our database on September 4th. Thank you very much for your attention and feel free to contact me by email. Thank you. I've been asked to summarize this presentation. It's quite hard, especially that I can't see you. So let me just say that I hope our presentations have been helpful to you. Feel free to contact us about any questions. After this meeting, we will send a questionnaire. Please give us feedback. We want to learn as well. We want to improve the quality of our events. So be very honest. If you feel that we have talked too much or any other critique, please write to us about it. There is one more issue that's often asked about. If you are a leader TeamNet, you can't be one in MAP and the first team. You can implement the POC or Prime, but you can't serve as a leader in first team, maybe MAP and TeamNet. This is mutually exclusive. You can be involved or employed if the foundation allows it, and then, of course, the maximum amount of your involvement must in sum amount to 1 FTE. You can apply to both programs, TeamNet and another one, but if your application is accepted, it's approved, you have to make a choice. So it is, of course, your decision to make. So that's all from us, and we are hoping to see great applications from you. Thank you.